We were few. Yes, Commissioner Gupta.
It's pretty
okay.
sensitive too. The mics are pretty sensitive. You can hear
Yeah.
it now.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Good evening. Welcome to the City of Milpitas Planning Commission meeting. Today, April 24, 2024. I call the meeting to order. At this time, may I request Commissioner Awasti to lead us to the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag. Yes. Thank you. At this time, Tony Creech, would you lead us to the declaration of the conflict of interest?
I think we need a roll call
Or
first.
whether-
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners and community members. I will now take attendance, starting with Commissioner Kong. She's absent this evening. Commissioner Colkins,
Here.
Commissioner Gupta,
Here.
Commissioner Wasti,
Here.
Commissioner Galong is absent. Commissioner Medina Ashby is absent at the moment, and Chair Albana.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. At this time, I will ask Attorney Creech to state the conflict of interest declaration.
Thank you, Chair. I ask the Chair and every other member of the Commission whether he or she has any financial or personal conflict of interest related to any of the items on tonight's agenda.
Commissioner Colkins,
None.
Commissioner Gupta,
None.
Commissioner Wasti,
None.
Chair Albana.
None.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And while I recognize we don't have any development applicants on tonight's agenda, nevertheless, it is our policy. So I will ask further if the Chair and every other member of the Commission to please disclose any campaign contributions of $100 or more received within the last 12 months from any of the parties entering into contracts with the city on tonight's agenda, or contributions received from any development project applicant for development projects on tonight's agenda.
Commissioner Colkins,
None.
Commissioner Gupta,
None.
Commissioner Wasti,
None.
Chair Albana.
None.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let the record reflect no reported conflicts.
Thank you, Attorney. And next, we have announcements. Any announcements from planning commissioners? Oh, approval of the agenda. So let's, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for April 24th.
I second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Calkins and Commissioner Awasti for that.
Commissioner Colkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Wasti,
Aye.
Chair Albana.
Aye.
Thank you.
At this time, would the commissioners have any announcements or planning director? Any announcements at this time about planning director announcements? Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. The only announcement I have is that the regularly scheduled meeting, May 8th, is canceled, and the next meeting for the Planning Commission will be May 22nd. Just wanted to remind everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Our next
Chair,
item.
if I may, one quick announcement.
Yes, sure, please.
Just a reminder again, because it is still that season, if anyone has not completed their AB 1234 training for ethics or gotten in their Form 700s, now is the pertinent time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next item is our public forum. Members of the public are invited to speak on any item that does not appear on today's agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less at the chair's discretion. When called to speak, you are encouraged to state your name for the record. As an item not listed on the agenda, no action can be taken. However, the Planning Commission may instruct the staff to place the item on a future meeting agenda. For our next item, we have our public hearing. which will be presented to us by our project planner, Mr. Avery Stark, for the housing opportunity number 8-1, the HOD.
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commission. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners, members of the public. The item before you, as stated, is the Housing Opportunity Districts, otherwise referred to as the HODs throughout this presentation. This is an addendum to the Milpitas General Plan 2040 EIR. There'll be a general plan text amendment and a zoning text and map amendment. Tonight, we'll review and discuss the final housing opportunity districts, the addendum.
Sorry, Avery, before we go on,
I'm sorry.
Chair.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I missed that. I have to ask the public. I'm sorry, Avery. May I just?
Do that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was
Sorry.
going to recommend, because I didn't see anyone stand for the public comment or submit comment cards, but there was a request for the public forum. So Chair, maybe we could ask the public if anyone would want to make a public comment.
Yes, would anybody in the public? That's not in the agenda tonight. Not in the agenda. Yes.
Yeah, and maybe if I may, for public explanation. So there are two public comment periods. There will be a public comment period right now, which is on any non-agendized item, any matter of public business you want to bring before the commission. There will also, for each item before the commission tonight, there'll be an opportunity for public comment specific to that item. So anyone wanting to make a general public comment right now may do so. Otherwise, when it comes to a particular item, members of the public can make a comment particular to that item.
So at this time, we don't have any public comments that's not on the agenda. We can proceed. Yes. So we'll call Mr. Avery Stark again. Take two. I'm sorry. We'll start.
It's good practice. Good evening, Planning Commission, Chair, Commissioners, members of the public, community members online. Again, the item in front of you is the Housing Opportunity Districts. Tonight, we will review and discuss the final Housing Opportunity Districts plan, the addendum to the Milpitas General Plan 2040 final EIR. And then this will be to provide recommendations for approval to the Milpitas City Council. The scope of this project includes a number of different actions. The first is, again, a general plan amendment to update the town center and the neighborhood commercial mixed-use descriptions, a zoning map text amendment to establish the neighborhood commercial mixed-use zones and CMU and subdistricts 1, 2, and 3, and then subdistricts to update the existing town center or TC zoning districts for TC 1, 2, and 3. And these changes aim to increase housing supply, implement the general plan policies, and revitalize community centers while incentivizing affordable housing in the city of Milpitas. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our consultants, Ramey and Associates. We have Chris Sentenig and Andrea on Zoom tonight to give the presentation, and we'll go back and forth from there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Avery, and thank you, Planning Commission and City of Milpitas for having us today. Next slide, please. My name is Chris Sensenig. I'm a associate principal at Ramey and Associates, and I'll be starting off this presentation, and then Antara Tandon will also be giving part of the presentation today. So the City of Milpitas is updating its zoning for the town center and neighborhood commercial mixed-use zones to foster the development of mixed-use neighborhoods. These zones, which we're referring to as housing opportunity districts, will remain centers of local retail businesses, while also incorporating more housing and amenities. The updates will implement the city's general plan vision and also housing element objectives. Next slide, twice over, one more time. Thank you. So the goals of this project are as follows. One is to meet the current and future regional housing goals that were outlined in the housing element. Second is to incentivize the building of more affordable housing in these areas. Third is to revitalize aging shopping centers, and also to streamline the approval process for housing projects. And lastly, to implement the general plan policies. Next slide. The general plan, next slide, Avery. The general plan outlined a number of policies that affect these areas. In the town center, some of the goals were to provide a variety of commercial, professional, civic, and restaurant and hotel and residential uses. Also to integrate residential and non-residential uses both vertically and horizontally across the areas, and increase economic support to commercial uses. This often means just building more housing so you have more people using the existing businesses. In the neighborhood commercial mixed use areas, the general plan wanted to provide a mix of commercial and residential uses in this new designation. Also encourage active neighborhood serving uses at the ground floor, similar to the town center, to provide for both vertically and horizontal mixed use residential development. And really, one of the main goals here is to encourage the redevelopment of these aging commercial centers and allow multifamily dwelling. Next slide. So the market context has really shifted quite a bit over the last decade, and there was a economic analysis created by BAE for the Gateway Main Street specific plan that really sheds a lot of light on these NCMU and TWC areas also. You know, there's just reduced demand for retail in general as people move to e-commerce, and so these single use large shopping centers with surface parking lots see a lot less business over time. The existing retail mix has also changed a lot over time, and we're seeing a lot more food and beverage wanting to come in general, high vacancy rates among a lot of mixed use projects. The NCMU and TWC locations are also not viable locations for offices. Milpitas in general has a relatively weak office market, and where office is viable in Milpitas, it's usually adjacent to the major transit hubs. And so the way forward with this housing opportunity districts, as far as retail is concerned, is to focus on quality over quantity and be very intentional about creating commercial nodes and elevating these areas with placemaking strategies. And again, most importantly, more homes improves the market conditions for existing commercial centers. Next slide. As part of our development of the HOD plan and zoning districts, we had a number of opportunities for outreach. We had stakeholder interviews with for-profit and nonprofit developers. We published 3 videos that summarized the project and had a feedback forum, and we also recently had a community development roundtable to discuss the proposed zoning changes and general plan amendment. What we heard from the stakeholders in general were greater heights and densities are needed to accommodate mixed-use projects. A project should allow flexibility in the location of where the retail is required. Parking requirements, the current parking requirements exceed market demand and hurt the feasibility of mixed-use projects. They suggested allowing creative ways to provide parking, including unbundling it from specific uses. They recommended that anything that reduces fees and processing time will make residential projects more feasible. And specifically to affordable housing projects, they have a very hard time financing vertical mixed use, largely because typically the affordable housing developers are not people that run mixed use projects. So that concludes my introduction. Now I'm going to turn it over to Antara to kind of go over the details of the housing opportunity districts, and then I'll be back to wrap up. Antara?
Thank you, Chris. Next slide. So I will be reviewing NCMU and TC as they are currently in the general plan and also what the proposed general plan amendment and zoning changes are. Next slide. So the neighborhood commercial mixed use or NCMU designation covers much of the smaller aging shopping centers around the city. The map on the right identifies 3 locations of NCMU, that is Dixon Road to the north, Calaveras Boulevard in the center, and Landis Ave in the south. The general plan currently allows for up to 0.75 FAR of non-residential space, which typically could accommodate a 5 to 8-story office building. Next slide. The designation does allow for residential mixed-use projects, but has a restrictive ratio on the amount of housing that is possible. The maximum density allowed is approximately 21 dwelling units per acre, but it requires that you maximize the non-residential use to get there. Now, this is atypical and unlikely to be feasible in practice. The designation also allows 100% affordable residential-only projects, but those require approval of the City Council. And currently, there is no NCMU-specific zone in the zoning code. These areas are currently zoned C1, C2, or MP, hence the need for this project. Next slide. Accordingly, the plan recommendation would allow mixed-use buildings in these zones, while certain parcels would allow residential-only projects, and there will be a strong emphasis on affordable housing throughout. As a result, the city stands to benefit from increased revenue, heightened demand for retail, services and businesses, additional housing options, and increased availability of amenities, both for current and for future residents. Next slide. So the project examined the 3 areas, and we categorized them into 3 different distinct types of development and their potential for redevelopment. These include, first, the big box retail stores with large surface parking lots. Second were the smaller parcels along major streets and intersections with small shops and businesses. And third were some of the larger parcels which are on secondary or tertiary streets without street frontages and adjacent to residential zones. These are more amenable to residential-only projects. And based on this analysis, we have then proposed 3 new zones. The first category is NCMU 1, where the goal is to preserve the commercial floor area while allowing for vertical mixed-use development. And this would require a minimum non-residential FAR of 0.25. The second category is NCMU 2, which would retain ground floor commercial, but allow mixed use above. And here the minimum FAR for non-residential component would be 0.1, and this would apply along some of the smaller parcels along major streets. And the third category is NCMU 3, which would allow for residential-only parcels by not requiring any minimum commercial FAR, but that does not preclude any commercial development from happening on those parcels. All 3 of these, NCMU 1, 2, and 3, would allow a residential density of 65 dwelling units per acre, and they would allow a height of 75 feet or 6 stories. Next slide, please. Next slide, yeah. As an example, let's look at NCMU area along Calaveras Boulevard. It is currently marked by large underutilized commercial centers with surface parking lots and some vacant parcels. Next slide. Based on the proposal, the sites are categorized into 3 distinct types of development or potential for redevelopment based on their size, location, current use, and future use. So the parcels in blue are the largest stores with surface parking lots that would become NCMU 1 and would try to preserve commercial space. Parcels in pink or NCMU 2 are smaller and have street frontages, so that would allow mixed use with ground floor commercial and residential above. Here, the minimum non-residential FAR would be 0.1. And then the parcels in yellow are vacant or on secondary streets, which is ideal for residential-only development and are classified NCMU 3. Next slide, please. So presented here is a conceptual illustration of what phase 1 development could entail. We anticipate this development happening in different phases over time. So the initial phase would likely introduce new housing options as well as additional open spaces and pedestrian-friendly streets to the area. Next slide. Phase 2 would likely redevelop parcels along streets and introduce small businesses, restaurants, and stores to serve the residential units. Next slide. And phase 3 would focus on redeveloping some of the larger retail stores to incorporate horizontal or vertical mixed-use developments that include amenities like grocery stores and public plazas. Next slide. And finally, this is what the full redevelopment of NCMU at Calaveras Boulevard would look like at the proposed densities and heights. This revitalization effort would entail a mix of retail stores, restaurants, housing, open spaces, and other amenities. Next slide. Next. Yeah. As mentioned earlier, to realize this vision, the current GP definition has its limitations to allow mixed-use development. The proposed changes to densities and the non-residential requirement in the zoning would also require a general plan amendment to the land use definitions. And these updates will ensure that there is consistency between the general plan and the new proposed mixed-use zones. The text you see on this page is actually the text that will be updated in the general plan land use designation for NCMU. Next slide. And here's the proposed zoning map for NCMU at Calaveras, the example we just looked at earlier. You can see that the larger retail properties preserve the non-residential space under NCMU 1 in red. The smaller parcels would require ground floor commercial along major streets under NCMU 2 in pink. And the parcels in yellow designated NCMU 3 will not require any minimum non-residential area and would allow residential-only development. Next slide. Similarly, this is the map for NCMU at Landes. Again, the three classifications, NCMU 1 in red would allow most of the commercial space to be preserved. NCMU 2 along corridors and some of the parcels to the right would require commercial spaces on the ground floor mainly and residential above. And the NCMU 3 designation in yellow would allow residential-only projects. Next slide. And this is the map we would update for NCMU at Dixon Road. Again, as I mentioned, NCMU 1 is where all the larger retail stores are, which would preserve the commercial area. We have some of the smaller parcels in pink as NCMU 2, which would require commercial on the ground floor. And NCMU 3 would allow residential-only projects since they are closer to some of the existing residential developments. Next slide. Moving on to the other land use designation, which is the town center. The town center designation of the general plan allows up to 40 dwelling units per acre and an FAR of up to 0.85. The map on the right identifies the town center designation in the heart of the city along Calaveras Boulevard. Next slide. However, residential-only projects are not permitted under any circumstance. Residential mixed use is allowed, but a project must have a minimum of 0.35 FAR of non-residential use to get the 40 dwelling unit per acre residential density. Again, this is atypical and it is very difficult to be feasible. Next slide. So like the NCMU, the goals and objectives for town center are similar. The plan recommendation would allow mixed-use buildings in these zones, while certain parcels will allow residential-only projects, and there will be a strong emphasis incentivizing affordable housing throughout. The result of this recommendation, the city will benefit from increased revenue, increased demand for retail, additional amenities for residents, and additional housing options overall. Next slide. Just like the NCMU, the TC has very similar characteristics. Again, they were classified in these three categories: the big box retail with large surface parking lots, the parcels along major streets, and then large parcels which were more amenable to residential-only developments along secondary streets or adjacent to residential zones. So again, here we have proposed three different zones, TC 1, 2, and 3. TC 1 would retain some of the commercial floor area. Here, the minimum non-residential requirement would be 0.35 FAR. TC2 would allow non-residential development on the ground floor with a minimum requirement of 0.1 FAR. And TC3 does not require any minimum non-residential FAR, so it would allow residential-only projects. And all three designations, TC1, 2, and 3, would allow a residential density of 55 dwelling units per acre. This, compared to NCMU, which allowed 65, is slightly lower. And the maximum height here, again, would be 75 feet or 6 stories, which the TC zone already allows under a conditional use permit. Next slide. So here is the TC area, currently marked by large commercial centers with surface parking lots of some vacant parcels. Some of these commercial centers are very successful, so they are unlikely to redevelop anytime soon, but still the entire area will be rezoned to categorize them under TC 1, 2, or 3. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the sites are categorized into 3 distinct types of development or their potential for redevelopment based on their size, location, current use, and future use. The parcels in blue are the largest stores with surface parking lots that would become TC1. These are some of the more successful commercial centers and are unlikely to redevelop. The parcels in pink are smaller and have street frontages, so they would allow mixed-use development with some ground floor commercial under TC2. And the parcels in yellow are vacant or on secondary streets, ideal for residential-only development. Next slide. And presented here is a conceptual illustration of what phase 1 redevelopment could entail. This phase would introduce new housing options as well as additional open spaces and pedestrian-friendly streets to the area. Next slide. And finally, here's what a full redevelopment of TWC at Calaveras Boulevard would look like at proposed densities and heights. Again, as I mentioned, it has some successful shopping centers which are unlikely to redevelop, but the rest of the area could redevelop as this mixed-use walkable neighborhood with open spaces, housing, restaurants, retail stores, and other amenities. Next slide. So similar to NCMU, the current GP definition of TWC has its limitations to allow mixed-use development. There are these proposed changes to densities and non-residential requirement that require a GP amendment, and the text here on the slide will ensure that there is consistency between the general plan designation and the proposed zones in the zoning code. Next slide. And here is the map of the TC that we looked at with parcels in red being designated TC1, parcels in pink being designated TC2, and parcels in yellow being designated TC3. Next slide. Along with the changes in densities, FARs, these zones also looked at updating other standards to make mixed-use development more feasible in these areas. One of them is open space. The zones would require 3.5 acres per 1,000 population in these areas, which is a reduction from the city requirement of 5 acres per 1,000. This would make the requirement consistent with specific plans and make mixed-use redevelopment more feasible in these areas. Additionally, since many of these sites are much larger than other parts of the city, the developers will be required to provide either 5% or 10% of the site as publicly accessible open space. There is always the state density bonus law, which allows developers a number of concessions based on the affordable units and level of affordability. And so there could be flexibility in some of these standards. Next slide. And some other key changes to the standards also included a reduction in the number of parking spaces. The new zones would require a minimum of 1 space per unit for residential development and a minimum of 1 space per 300 square feet of commercial use. These again are minimums, and the developer may choose to provide more. But based on our analysis and some of the market studies, the current parking requirement applicable in the rest of the city would result in multiple floors of parking, whether structured or underground, and would also significantly increase the cost of these projects, making them hard to pencil in today's market. Next slide. And also just looking at California's AB 2097, which precludes any public entity from actually requiring parking from parcels which are within a half-mile buffer from public transit. So this would put NCMU Landes in one of those areas of half-mile of public transit, and public transit is defined in this case as either a high-frequency rail or a metro stop, or the intersection of 2 high-frequency bus lines, which would go under NCMU Landes. And hence, it cannot require a minimum parking in this particular designation. Next slide. In addition to the zoning standards, the objective design standards, which are adopted by the city in 2022, will also apply to all new multifamily residential and mixed-use projects in buildings in these areas. Next slide. And the ODS is an important document because it will include transition standards to some of the residential zones which abut the TC and the NCMU areas, as we saw. So these are the R1, R2, and R3 residential zones. And some of the standards which are outlined in the ODS will include greater setbacks to match the adjacent zone, upper floor step backs above 40 feet of building height, and then a 45-degree daylight plane measured from the 10 feet above property line. All of these standards together will ensure that there are smooth transitions to some of the low-density residential neighborhoods. They will minimize shadow and also minimize building mass and bulk. Okay, back to Chris for some of the other impacts of this project. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Antara. Next slide. So at the onset of this project, one of the concerns was what would be the fiscal impact of this change of zoning on the city. And just to kind of like put that in frame, the NCMU and TWC areas represent about 9% of city's sales tax revenue. And the city's sales tax revenue only represents about 30% of the general funds. So like if all of the NCMU and TWC redeveloped, it would only impact 2.7% of the general fund revenues. But we would expect really only a small portion of all these areas to redevelop, you know, and they would redevelop slowly over time. Seifel Consulting also found that the new infill mixed use and residential development is actually likely to have a positive fiscal impact on the city. And if the zoning changes are not made, no redevelopment is likely in these areas. The current general plan commercial and residential ratios are just infeasible. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I already went over this one. This one, thanks. As part of the housing opportunity districts, is also part of the city's affordable housing strategy. The biggest part of this is more units equal more affordable housing. With the affordable housing ordinance, 15% of new development is required to be affordable. So allowing more development will create more affordable housing. Second, the HODs incentivize 100% affordable projects in all the NCMU 1, 2, and 3 and TC 1, 2, and 3s, where if an affordable housing project came forward, there would be no minimum commercial requirement for that development. Next slide. One more time. And so to summarize, the housing opportunity districts will implement general plan goals and policies, incentivize affordable housing, help meet the current and future regional housing goals and implement the housing element. It will support the general plan goal of revitalizing aging shopping centers, support existing and future neighborhood serving retail and professional services by providing more customers, and also create a net positive impact on city revenue. Thank you for your time, and we will of course be here to answer questions, but back to you, Avery.
Thank you, Chris and Antara. So just a little bit of our kind of requirements here as far as public noticing. So a notice was placed in the Milpitas Post. Postcards were sent to all owners of affected properties and then anyone within a 1,000-foot radius of said properties. To date, we've received 3 comments on the project in front of you. One comment is from the San Francisco Water District, which is in regard to the addendum, which is attached to your packet, and specifically to note that the comments that were made by that organization don't actually pertain to any environmental impacts that this project would have on the community. It's really a relaying of potential standards that they would like to see the city adopt as it relates to parcels that they own and property utility easements. And those utility easements, of course, are privately managed and maintained. And so the standards that they've outlined actually don't play a part in today's decision as far as the environmental CEQA document is concerned, but will still be addressed and analyzed by our CEQA consultant as this document moves forward to City Council. There were 2 other comments that were received this evening regarding height, bulk, and massing of these proposed new buildings as they relate to adjacent residential properties. And as our consultants, Contra and Chris pointed out, when it comes to the heights that are being discussed tonight, these are already the standard heights that would be allowed in these zoning districts, no different from today if someone proposed to redevelop these sites with a maximum up to those heights with a CUP in those zoning districts. And in addition to that, our objective design standards really talk to the specifics about if you have, for example, a home adjacent to one of these parcels where there are going to be protections in place to help ensure appropriate setbacks at particular heights so that the feeling of a large building is reduced. And any project that comes forward as a part of this plan would still go through the normal review process. So likely all these projects throughout the next decade or two would still come back to Planning Commission for your review and consideration. The city would still provide its analysis in terms of light, any kinds of shadow studies that might be necessary. So each project site would still be looked at and analyzed individually in conjunction with these standards, the objective design standards, and any other state law that may apply. Next. This is just to discuss the CEQA addendum that was prepared for this project. And so this, the addendum to the Milpitas general plan, the final EIR, which is approved and updated in 2021, addresses the potential environmental effects and the plan to build out for Milpitas over the course of the plan. And conducted the implementation of the general plan would result in various levels of environmental impacts. Mitigation measures were incorporated into that final EIR document to reduce potential impacts from development under the general plan's guidance. This addendum, which is a part of this project, was analyzed again in conjunction with that final EIR and has been prepared pursuant to multiple CEQA guideline sections to evaluate whether the project's environmental impacts are covered within that scope of the original EIR. The addendum evaluation details any changes to the project's change in circumstances under which are taken and or new information would substantially increase or change any of those analyses that were done as a part of that plan and to determine if there would be any cause of one or more impacts to the environment. And the attached addendum, which is a rather large document, does substantiate and support the city's determination that the HOD changes with the scope of the general plan update do not require subsequent action under CEQA, and it adequately analyzes the potential environmental impacts and in conjunction with the final EIR that the city conducted as a part of its general plan update. Next. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission open the public hearing to receive comments, then close the public hearing, and then adopt resolution number 24-015, recommending that the City Council, 1, approve the general plan text amendment number GP 24001 to change the description of the town center, TWC, and neighborhood commercial mixed use NCMU descriptions. 2, approve the zoning map and text amendment ZA 24001 to establish the neighborhood commercial mixed use and CMU subdistricts 1, 2, and 3, and the districts and subdistricts of the existing town center districts to establish the subdistricts TC 1, 2, and 3. And finally, to adopt the housing opportunity districts addendum to the Milpitas General Plan 2040 final EIR. Staff is happy to answer any questions along with our consultants who are available online. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avery Stark. Would any of the commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, I could start. Yeah, I think it's a nice plan, but I do have need some better understanding. I see these mixed use buildings all over town. I mean, San Jose, everywhere there's a mixed commercial and residential. Typically, commercial space at the ground floor and residential above that. It's all over town. So how is your plan different than what is already there all over town?
So you're talking about a different city, San Jose, separate from the city of Milpitas. So these,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yep. So these zoning districts currently wouldn't allow for that mixed use to occur. They would only allow for commercial only to be there. And so this plan is to implement the general plan's policies to create a more mixed use environment so we can see this type of product in our city in these commercial centers where currently they wouldn't be allowed. Or if they were to be allowed under the general plan, it'd be very, very limited residential units. So that's that 22 dwelling units per acre. And so this plan is to implement those policies and the vision of the housing element to create more affordable housing and more opportunity for developers to create that type of mixed use design that you're saying. So Santana Row, we have some mixed use in the city of Milpitas on South Main Street. Down, there's the 612 South Main Street where you've got commercial tenant space
Yeah.
on the
Right
bottom.
across BART. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So this is to help make that possible and so that it can pencil out for developers. And so that's why the changes to the designations and increases of floor area ratio for residential in some cases, then decreasing of commercial floor area ratio to make it possible.
So are you saying that we are trying to catch up with the rest of the Bay Area? Is that what it is, or your plan is different than what is already there?
No, it is. You are correct. It is what is happening throughout the Bay Area. Exactly. These just happen to be 3 distinct commercial shopping centers that previously did not allow for this type of design, that the city's identified as areas that could not only sustain and house that type of those projects, but also are the best feasible locations for them to take place.
Are these the only 3 locations that are possible in Milpitas, or is just a start?
So the city currently has an MXD zoning district, which is usually within the Midtown specific plan or the Gateway plan. So this is an expansion to that concept to allow greater mixed use development to happen outside of the Gateway specific plan, but at a slightly reduced, intensity. And it currently also exists in the Metro specific plan, in otherwise known as TASP, where we already have, for example, where we have like Trader Joe's, and then above that there's all the apartment buildings. So again, that's vertical mixed use, and so these 3 shopping centers are very horizontal and usually only 1 to 2 stories. And so the plan is really about creating the opportunity to see more vertical mixed use and still allow for horizontal mixed use to occur as these sites may redevelop over time.
But what about other locations like McCarthy Ranch and across McCarthy Ranch? There are a lot of same type of commercial areas. Those could also be the candidate, right?
They could be the candidate. As a part of the study and the staff's analysis with our consultants, those weren't determined to be the areas of best opportunity to see for mixed use. Those are highly successful shopping centers where the infusion of housing isn't the most appropriate given the types of services and access to transit that people would need if they were to live in above any of these current shopping center areas. So yes, like we still have McCarthy Ranch, we still have where we're going to have a large commercial presence, but right now those aren't the focus of the housing element in terms of where we want to place housing as it relates to services.
And if I may comment as well, the general plan outlines several opportunity areas within the city, and 2 of them are specific plans. 4 of them are NCMU areas. 1 of them is California Circle, but there's already some development going on over there. So we focused on these 3. And some areas are to convert some heavier industrial into lighter industrial. So the general plan tried to prioritize growth in areas that already have amenities and a mix of uses. It tried to encourage growth in a more sustainable way rather than allowing growth everywhere. So these 3 are definitely 3 of the focus areas and the opportunity areas outlined in the general plan.
Okay, I'll stop for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta, and also Planning Director. Anybody else? Yeah, I was going to ask Avery here. So these are just so far the 3 that was identified. Will we be able to, let's say 10 years from now, expand that? Are there areas we could expand that idea of developing those 3 areas?
In theory, yes, we could see the expansion of the NCMU areas. We could In a decade from now, the landscape might be different. The economy will be different. The needs of businesses and developers may change. And this is a plan that is meant to be revisited. So this is not set in stone, but something that will be reevaluated as we go through general plan updates, would be reevaluated as we go through code updates to consider, okay, if these 3 areas are highly successful and they're working really, really well, and we want to see if we can take that and look at other areas of the city that it might be applicable, we absolutely could in the direction of council as far as policy setting. And so it is possible, but right now, as a part of the housing element and the general plan that we have in place, these are the key identified areas for sustainable growth in our city. So that's why we focused on them for this project.
And these 3 areas would be at least the first phase where it needs to develop,
Yes, one where it,
like
it-
refacing the city, right? Yeah.
Correct. And really it's about access to existing amenities, transit, services that are already in place. And so the addition and infusion of housing or higher quality commercial space is going to be viable and is going to be able to make it long term.
Also, if I could add,
Yes.
kind of going back to the future or looking ahead, our regional housing needs allocation more than doubled. And this number that the state gives to us and requires cities to zone and plan for, it comes out every 8 years. So the last one was, I think, a little over 3,000. And then this recent 8-year cycle that we have to plan for is 6,713. We don't know what that number will be in the future, but if it doubles again, that's a huge number. And cities are required to plan and zone for it. So it's hard to say, but years down the line, as a state requires more housing, we may have to look at it again, but this is our best effort to get ahead of that and plan for it in a better way.
That was what I was going to say that we basically are ahead and planning ahead, but we have to see where we're going and we provide some buffers. Yeah. Commissioner Medina Aspi.
So my question is, how does the city propose to take these properties, because they're privately owned properties, correct? So how do we go about with the landowners? Is it their responsibility to reconfigure their buildings and their property?
Correct. So out of stakeholder meetings and conversations with private developers, landowners, and property owners, these would be projects that would be brought forth by them. This is not land the city would purchase or have the right to develop. So this would be coming out of an existing owner of, say, the Beardford Square across the street here is, as they look to the future of what their site might hold. And as we've engaged in them in these conversations, it's all about making sure that not only are we right sizing it for our community, but we're also considering about what those developers might want to do with their property. So their input was taken at various stages over the last year and a half as we crafted this plan and its standards so that it would be feasible for them to consider that reinvestment and the redevelopment of their sites. So the city would not own any of this land, but we would still follow our normal procedures when it comes to entitlement of the land.
Okay. And what is their take on it? Are they in agreement? Do they?
Yeah, so a lot of the standards that you saw on the screen in terms of FAR and parking and the need for the balance of commercial and residential really came out of those conversations talking about what is going to make it possible for the city to see that type of investment in these localized and focused areas so that we can, one, meet our regional housing goal needs, but also provide a community area and space for Milpitas residents to live, work, and play, right? And revitalizing a shopping center that, as you walk around, you see Lucky's has gone out of business, and as you see empty shopping centers, this plan is really about how can we breathe new life into them in a way that is sustainable, but also getting things for our community that you need, access to services. It could be a mixed-use building that's going to have your dentist office, it could have childcare in it, and then on the top floor, it could have 20 apartment buildings, for example. And so that's really what this plan is about.
If I could also interject again, we also didn't just do outreach to developers, profit and for-profit and nonprofit, but we also did outreach to property owners. We heard from several different property owners, generally support for the project because some of their sites are smaller and are not feasible. They're currently vacant. So this would allow them to do something with their properties. So we heard from some property owners near Dixon. We heard from some property owners south of Calaveras, also Chappelle, the town center area. So just we also did outreach to the property owners. Just wanted to make sure.
And I have a question here. Mr. Avery, out of the 3 property owners, do you think anyone is in line to build something really quick if everything goes through?
I think, yeah, there are definitely some property owners who have already approached the city and have been waiting to kind of see and hear the direction of this plan to figure out where we're going to go with it. I know we've had different conversations with property owners over the last year and a half to figure out what will make it feasible for you, right? And that's how we got a lot of this input. So I don't have a timetable. I wish I had a magic 8-ball. That would be very cool. But we have definitely received a lot of interest and a lot of comments on how can we either assemble parcels where, again, smaller parcels might be hard to develop. And so property owners are trying to consider how they can come together. And this plan would allow them those tools and the resources to make that happen.
And are we going to suggest any type of retailers which are going to be there, or it is their decision altogether? Thinking that if someone wants to put up a banquet hall, there's a lot of people want banquet halls with the growing population for birthdays and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the zoning text, which was a part of the packet, outlines all of the uses that would be either permitted by right, require conditional use permits, or would require or would not be permitted. And so things like a banquet hall, restaurants, and things like that nature are assessed inside the zoning code. So this is just as much about the adoption of a plan, but also the municipal code zoning text update to create these zoning districts. So these existing sites that are zones C1 and C2 and TC could come in tomorrow and say, okay, here's the new standards, here's what's possible, this is where we can go now. So yes.
There'll be more retail, they can put in more retailers, and they'll have a broad spectrum to play with.
Yeah, so in terms of there being more retail, in some places we may see some more retail, and some places we may see the redevelopment of a site with less retail, but the addition of residential units, the addition of office space or other mixed uses to make that retail center more viable. But in terms of the category of uses that are allowed or permitted, those are outlined in the zoning text amendment, the red line version attached to the Planning Commission staff report, and then the clean line version attached to the resolution for City Council for the general plan updates to the text, and then to the text amendment, the map amendment, or an ordinance update. Those are attached in the packet.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to speak to some businesses that could come in to the city, we have a very strong economic development team, and I know that they are actively engaging with businesses who are not currently in Milpitas to try to get them to come over.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment or not comment, ask questions?
I just had a brief one about with all the housing developments that are going on, do you guys communicate much with like BTA on bus schedules and those kind of things for, future development?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you, Commissioner. So whenever we have a property that may have a bus stop within that block segment of a new project, we actually route the plans to VTA. They have a department and a team dedicated to the reviewing of those project plans so they can begin an understanding what the addition of a new population would add to their bus services, how they can then communicate with those developers on making sure people that may live or work in those buildings have access to VTA, Metro cards, or again, depending on where they're located, access to like a BART Clipper card. So each time a new project is being proposed and it has either an AC Transit or VTA within that block segment, we're routing those sets of plans to them and along with the school board for their input on how that might change the city's population and the services they provide to residents.
And we also hold quarterly meetings with VTA. So we let them know about projects like this so that they can anticipate how to adjust bus service to best meet our needs. And they proactively reach out to us and ask for future development so that they can continue to provide the best service for Milpitas.
Another question I have, Mr. Avery. Is it there a possibility we might lose the retail place to 100% affordable housing for low and lower income groups?
It is possible, yes, that one of the that it is possible really anywhere in most portions of the city that we could lose an existing retailer or commercial center to 100% affordable housing project if the landowner developer chose to do that. That's something outside of our control. So yes, that is possible.
And it is by right that they can do that.
Correct. In a large portion of our city, yes, there's a lot of by right state law that would say that they could take the existing tenant space. It could be, if it's in the metro specific plan, you saw that recently with 1300 South Main, it was previously a small warehouse building and that became a 100% affordable housing project. And part of what this project also aims to do is to help focus where we would want to see 100% housing projects be developed. So as our consultants walked through those different types of street segments and connections, there are parts where we still want to maintain high quality commercial services because that's what helps drive our local economy. And then there are areas on side streets or those outlining streets where we might want to see just housing. That might still be the best case to transition from your neighborhood in a short walk to be able to gain access to service where just housing might be the most appropriate use and would be allowed under this update.
Thank you.
Coming back to our favorite subject of parking. So your requirement is one parking spot per unit, right?
Correct.
Is that the minimum, or because that might be good enough for affordable housing, but not for any non-affordable regular housing? You probably need maybe two parking spots per unit.
So that is the minimum requirement that is a part of this project. It's a great question. And so that, again, as a minimum would state, that is what the developer would have to provide unless they're in certain areas of our city where the state preempts us from requiring parking spaces. But most product types, if we're considering a mixed market rate affordable housing project, again, the developer is going to want to ultimately make sure that they have tenants in those spaces, and that might facilitate more parking, again, than the municipal code requires. If it's a townhome product, for example, there likely would be a 2-car garage in that product. Or if it's a condominium building, there might be tandem parking where you're still going to get 2 parking spaces per unit. But again, that's really all at the discretion of the developer. But what we've set out is a base minimum to help ensure that as certain areas of our city redevelop, that they're not hindered by a really high parking demand or requirement that would make it infeasible. A great example, and we can bring it up to the screen if we need to, as we study different case areas for this project in town center, and we were looking at our existing development standards for parking. If you were to redevelop and build a new 6-story building with, like, say, roughly 200 apartment units in it in new commercial, the parking demand would be so great that it would require like a 3-story parking structure above grade and a 2-story parking structure below grade. And at that level of intensity of parking stalls, projects become infeasible. The developer can't afford to build them simply. And so we would not see that type of investment in our city. So the deep and really intense analysis that we went through in terms of establishing what is a minimum that is not only reasonable but fair, but will also get us to a place where we're going to see investment in our city was a minimum of 1 or residential projects per unit. And then that 1 parking space per 300 square feet for commercial space, which is really a very happy balance between kind of our more restrictive commercial uses that maybe require more parking spaces to some of our less restrictive parking requirements. So that 1 to 300 is actually a very reasonable and usable number that planning staff sees, and as we communicated with developers and stakeholders and property owners, as being a place that they can meet so that they can, still make it possible for you to visit their shops or their stores or visit your friends at their homes as they may live in these, mixed use projects.
Thank you.
And if I could add a little bit to the parking, also want to note that state density bonus law, if a project takes advantage of that, establishes a maximum parking requirement for residential based off of number of bedrooms. 1 parking space for studios in 1 bedroom, 1.5 for 2 and 3 bedroom, and then 2.5 for 4 bedroom. Given the densities in these areas, we likely aren't going to see 4 bedroom units, but for the 3 bedroom, it's 1.5. So that maximum is actually not that much higher than the minimum that we're requiring. So that's just some added context as well. And of course, they could also request waivers and concessions from parking standards. But we're hoping that this will, provide a good balance, as Associate or Acting Senior Planner Avery Stark put it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Planning Director, for those clarification. And any other questions? Thank you so much, Avery, and also I'm thanking the staff too. Maybe at this time I can ask if there will be any comments from the public. Has anybody submitted any paper list? And this will be regarding the things on the agenda.
Chair, I haven't received any speaker cards, so should any community member, I'll take your speaker.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Good evening.
If I may, anyone who, as the chair I think said earlier in the meeting, anyone who wants to make a public comment, what you should do is fill out one of those speaker cards. Are they available, I think, in the back as well as up front there? You can see it over there, deposit it. That way Ms. Medina can call people in order those speaker cards are received. So if anyone wants to make a public comment, please take a second to do that. Maybe what we can do in the interest of time to give people some time to do that is to recognize the individual currently at the microphone as our first public speaker.
Hi, good evening, dear Commission. I live in Milpitas, and I live close to the Landis site. And my parents will be living in a community that's just a few steps from one of the plazas there. So I understand that the goal of the city is to increase housing and also revitalize some of the commercial areas over there, which I generally support. I just want to bring some perspectives about the potential impact and alternative possibilities that I can think of. So one thing is, from my observation, it looks like generally those super high, like 6-story buildings are not put in the same block as the really low 2-story residential buildings. I rarely see that in the Bay Area. So like one example of such a tall building is the Trader Joe's in right next to the Great Mall. And there are some other nearby relatively tall buildings. Those are 5 stories. And they're like really far from any of the 2-story residential buildings. So I'm thinking that maybe we can reconsider the location for like those like 6-story high, and especially like if you have commercial in the first floor, it's going to be like even higher. And also, I would like to see if you have looked at the Willow Village project in Menlo Park, and they basically have like a commercial / office area that are really low density. They are planning to develop it into like a complex of higher density with a mixture of retail and office and housing, including like affordable housing. I believe that would probably be a better solution. And I see that the area, the commercial area between 680 and the BART line, between Landis and Calaveras, that region has a lot of commercial spaces that are really low density. I even see that the parking spaces are really empty. I'm just curious if that can be a alternative target. That's way bigger than the few places that we're talking about. And yeah, so basically that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who's next, please?
Yes, now I have a speaker card from Mr. Shang.
Each speaker will have 3 minutes.
Council members and presenters and all the all the speakers. By listening to the presentations, I have several questions. But today, I came here because back in March, I learned there's a projects from Mr. Jie Lee and also Liz by attending another building permit approval meeting back in March. After listening to the presenters, I actually live at 1459 Kenton Drive, which is very close to Ocean Supermarket. Okay, so my very first questions to the proposal is how many residents are involved? Because in your presentation, we just see the zoning area, but we do not know how many houses will be changing their zoning if we approve these projects. So if we do not know how many families are going to be involved, what is the trade-off between the new zoning number of people going to be brought into the community and how many people will be affected? So this is my very first questions, because in the presentation, it does not present this information. Second question is, if we imagine that on July 4th, usually the city will present a firework at the sports center. If we have a green zoning area by 5-6 stories, just behind or just next to the sports center, we can imagine that part of the other side of residents will not be able to see fireworks. Are you getting the picture that because we have large sports centers, which is really serving not only local residents, but also the whole community? And your presentation by zoning that green zones is not only just affecting a group of people in local area.
Thank you so much.
But
Thank you so much. We'll have the next speaker, please.
Okay,
Thank you for that comment.
thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Now we have Manali Desai.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a resident and owner close to one of the proposed area, which is Lenders. And I have a few questions actually when I was hearing this. So first, when the presentation was ended with saying the public notice was sent. So definitely I did receive, but when I talked to a lot of my neighbors and the surrounding areas, a lot of people did not receive it, and I'm afraid that a lot of people do not know about this proposal. So my question is, they are going to send another notice or something, or that is only one notice? Because I guess in neighborhood, most of the people do not know, and I'm living very close to the that proposed area. It's just next to that plan. Another question is when they mention, actually, I want to say that it's not the updated analysis. Can you share the photo of that Landis area? It says that Lucky is empty, but there is another business is over there right now, which is very successful, and it is drawing a lot of traffic over there. So that draws to another concern when it says with the new development for the commercial property with 300 square feet, there will be only one car parking. I don't think that is going to accommodate the existing foot traffic over there. So regarding public notice, I'm just a little concerned that they should send out again, and we should have, I don't know if there is going to be more hearing, but yeah, that's the main concern here. Thank you.
So much. Next.
Next, we have Sanket Gandhi.
Hey, hello everyone. So yeah, I would like to draw one attention to what Manali mentioned. So actually, I'm her husband. We live in the same community where this proposed plan is over the Landis Avenue, the NCMU, that is the proposed NCMU, which is right behind our house or our community. And the first concern is regarding privacy. We feel that since if the 6-story homes will be there, right? And our community is all at the lower level, ground level, right? And it is right across the South Park Victoria Avenue. So we feel that there will be a violation to our privacy because whoever is staying at the top floor or whatever, they will can directly look into our backyard or our bedroom window and those kind of things. I understand that the planning member has mentioned that there will be some separation or something like that, but what they are going to do about the level 4 or level 5 or level 6? So that is my first question. Another thing is, I believe this all started with an empty retail area where the business is not happening. They mentioned that since everyone is going e-commerce, the retail is not happening. But and then they also showed the photo, which my wife already pointed out that the Lucky was closed out and it ran out of business. But with the latest information, I'm not sure if they have um, reviewed the current information. As she mentioned, there is a new grocery store called Apni Mandi, and let me emphasize this one. It's a 24/7 grocery store, and it has been drawing a lot of crowd to it. Again, there is also Dunkin' that is opening up. There is another tea stall, Pico Bee, that is opening up. So I'm not sure on what basis it is decided that these retails are not running and they are just empty, vacant lots. Another thing I would like to mention is um, why only 100% affordable housing? Why not regular housing? And what is going to happen? Again, another thing is since they are mentioning that there's going to be only one parking per unit, do we have infrastructure to support? Because on an average, it has been shown that per family, there would be minimum on an average 2 cars per family. So do we have any infrastructure to support those kind of additional vehicles being parked on the street? If you look at the Landis Avenue, it's just a 2-lane street. If you look at the South Park Victoria Avenue, it's just 1-lane street. So how all this traffic is going to be taken care of? Third question is
Thank you. Is there anybody else, please?
Chair, yes. Lastly, we have Bhaskar Banjara.
Yeah, my name is Bhaskar Banjara, and my first question is it the only public hearing meeting or we will have another about the same matter? I want the answer.
We can answer after. Please go ahead.
Okay, when?
The 3 minutes will start right now after your speech.
Okay. Second is this the only thing you have dispatched or there was something more on this?
Go ahead and please continue your comment.
Yeah. I could not read. And so many people might have, and it was left in my box, stuck. And I thought, strange. And then I found it. I don't know what it is. At the same time, we received this. Connect. If we are connecting people on social, this is a big, big event or project which is disturbing and doing so many things to the residents. So you people, I think, have not thought, and time given is 2-3 days. Can you see the crowd? You should ask a question to yourself, why there are very few people. So my question is, this meeting should be called again. And we should get opportunity to read and also give your details. What is the current situation? What is it legally? And what law you want to change? So please mention on the card so people know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Since there are no more other public comment,
There are no more speaker cards, Chair. Thank you.
thank you. Do I get a motion?
You could call for a motion now to close the public hearing, or if there was more questions that anyone needed to ask to staff, we could get those done before the public hearing closes.
Is there anything you want to ask staff? Do I get a motion to close the public?
I make, oh,
Let me ask Liz. Liz, is there anybody online?
So
Yes.
we actually don't have online public comment. The city council directed for there not to be online public comment in future commission meetings. I don't remember, but a number of months ago.
Thank you, Attorney Critch. Yes. So at this time, do I get a motion to close the public hearing?
I make a motion to close the public comment.
I second.
I'm- Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm old. Most people don't know.
So thank you.
Commissioner Calkins?
Aye.
The vote to close the public hearing. Commissioner Gupta?
Aye.
Commissioner Wasti?
Aye.
Vice Chair Medina Ashby?
Aye.
And Chair Albana?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Would any of the commissioners would like to deliberate anything among ourselves? And maybe later on.
I
would like
just
a
want to say, I think there was a question about is there another opportunity for a meeting? I think this will go to the city council, if I'm right, and then that's also a public hearing.
Yes, this is just a recommendation to the city council. Ultimately, the city council has to decide whether to approve it or not. So there will be another public hearing and another round of notices that will go out.
Then, is satisfied with the presence of the people?
That-
All seven are
Sir, I have to continue.
satisfied or you are not satisfied?
Let me continue with the
So
meeting.
open that the planning commission call. And as I told you, put in proper manner.
Sir, please, your time is up. We don't have those comments after this anymore. So at this time, our next item will be the new business. What is it?
Currently, it's at discussion on this item. If the commission wishes to discuss among itself, it can do so at this time. And then once discussion is complete, any motions.
Correct. Thank you, Attorney. Yeah.
I just want to address the point that was made. I think most of the time we don't even get this many people. So it's very, very difficult for us to know if there's something wrong with our notice. So I think to answer your question, we are satisfied with the response, but normally we don't get that much response.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta. I guess what we have to tell here is basically we will take note of what you're saying. Thank you so much. We will take note of that. So how about any discussion among the commissioners here, please? There's nothing. Any comments now that for ourselves? You feel that, do you feel maybe we should
I'll just say I definitely appreciate the questions from the people in attendance here tonight. And just to reiterate, all of us are citizens as well of Milpitas. So we know what you're going through and how you feel about a lot of the things that are coming up. There are things we want to do to keep the city going and stay with the state, within the state guidelines. There are going to be other meetings on this, and when specific buildings get proposed to be built, you can have some more feedback at that time too. Avery and the planning department does a lot of work with trying to make sure the concerns that you guys brought today are addressed, as well as the concerns that we bring to them. So yeah, I appreciate the comments, the feedback, the presentation, and I'm sure they'll figure out trees or land use for privacy. Those kind of things can be addressed too in the future. So just wanted to state.
Yeah, I agree with that comment because when we see any individual project, at that time, I'm sure they will take into account all the feedback you gave in terms of parking or in terms of privacy. And then when the individual projects come at that time, same issue can be brought up, and those are valid points. So.
Okay, at this time, the public comments are closed. We were just giving a feedback of how we appreciate your presence and coming here. We will always take note about it, but we cannot make any decision. And then this is also brought up to the City Council. At this time, do I have any motions regarding this item discussed? No?
No,
No.
the public hearing was already closed. The discussions can keep going until anyone wants to make a motion.
So I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 24-015, recommending that the City Council, 1, approve the general plan text amendment number GP 24-0001 to change the description of Town Center TWC and the neighborhood commercial mixed use NCMU descriptions. Number 2, approve a zoning map and text amendment for ZA 24-0001 to establish the neighborhood commercial mixed use NCMU 1, 2, and 3 districts and sub-districts, and update the existing town center TC districts to establish the sub-districts TC-1, 2, and 3, adopt the Housing Opportunity District amendum to the Milpitas General Plan 2040 FEIR, Schedule number 20200-70348.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta. Our next item would be.
Sorry, we need the vote.
Oh, we have to take a vote. Yes. Vote, please.
Commissioner Colkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Wasti,
Aye.
Vice Chair Medina Ashby,
Aye.
Chair Albana.
Aye.
Thank you.
Our next item would be new businesses. Having no new businesses to be discussed this evening. Let me read this. Any person aggrieved by any final decision of any board, commission, or department head of the City of Milpitas may appeal the decision to the City Council by filing a written notice of the appeal with the City Clerk within 12 calendar days of the date of said decision and paying the required fees. This time limit shall be strictly enforced. At this time, make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Meeting adjourned.
Sorry, I didn't catch it for the record. Who was the meeting maker of the motion?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Commissioner
I
Hawkins,
second.
seconded by Commissioner Wasti.
And then we need a roll call vote.
Commissioner Colkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Gupta,
Aye.
Commissioner Wasti,
Aye.
Vice Chair Medina Ashby,
Aye.
and Chair Albana.
Aye,
Thank you.
thank you. Meeting adjourned.